How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, this brother here, his name is Hassan Bennet, and he spent 13 years of his life in jail on trumped up charges. This story is not new at all to the royal family. It is quite common that many in the royal family are wrongly convicted. And the thing that gets me about these type of cases, I've read numerous articles where the prosecutor, is allowed to suppress evidence to clear you. Something that a lot of people don't know, and some may know, about prosecutors. Whatever evidence that they receive, they are supposed to show all evidence, even if it leads to a person being not guilty. But they don't operate like that. They want to get as many convictions under their belt to further their careers. You know, they like to have 100% convictions. And so what's so unique about this particular case is that our king here acted as his own lawyer, and when all of this stuff first happened to him, the lawyer that he had poorly represented him and also had evidence to fully exonerate him. But most likely, whoever his lawyer was the enemy, and they purely don't give a fuck. You know, don't think that when you get a lawyer that look like the enemy, that they care about your pain and plight. See, what you'll do is you'll spill your guts, but you got to remember that the enemy is hearing about their behavior, and they already know about it. And that's something that I want people not to be confused. Like, oh wow, I got this Caucasian lawyer, and they seem to really care about my immediate situation. Well, they got to eat too, you know. So this is not surprising. So I have a very, very long article, and I'm not going to read it all, but I will put it there for y'all to read. And I also have a audio that I want y'all to listen to. But let me read a bit of this so you can get a fuller picture. So you see the title here: after 13 years in prison and 4 trials, inmate who defended himself acquitted in 2006 West Philly murder. Hassan Bennet always insisted that he was innocent, not just when he was first arrested, days after the September 2006 murder of one man and the shooting of another in West Philadelphia. But throughout his first, second, and third trials for the crimes, for more than a dozen years, Bennet sat in a prison waiting for justice and working to win it. The first prosecution ended in a mistrial, and the second brought a guilty verdict and overturned on appeal. Bennet served as his own lawyer for his third trial last year, felling one jury vote short of an acquittal. And when his fourth trial begun last month, with Bennet also representing himself, the defendant opted to wear his prison uniform each day in the courtroom. On Monday, after deliberating for just 81 minutes, a jury of 7 women and 5 men brought his journey to an end. They acquitted him on all counts. Bennet erupted in joy and hugged his standby attorney when the verdict was read in a near empty courtroom in the Stout Center of Criminal Justice. Justice was foully served, said Camille May, 36, pumping his fist and joining a handful of Bennett's relatives and friends who raced to the building and celebrated in the lobby. I'm not surprised, but I am surprised that it took so long for the truth to come out. It's a shame how if you don't have money and you're a black man, you get caught up in the system. When Bennett, 36, was released several hours later, he walked through the front door of the Criminal Justice Center, still wearing his blue prison uniform. I feel the whole process of changing clothes and hiding your armband is all a sham because everyone knows you're locked up, he said. I'm going to give you the bold truth. That's what I did. Bennett standby lawyer Ben Cooper said it was a credit to Bennett's preparation. This is very rare. Most pros defendants don't have success because of their lack of training, lack of experience, Cooper said after leaving the courtroom. Hassan took it upon himself to learn the law, to learn the rules of the evidence, to learn how to cross-examine witnesses. And I'll leave it right there. And all Mr. Bennett have is a high school education. We know that we are brilliant, and the enemy knows it too. That's why they do everything they can to rig shit up in their favor. So, we're going to listen to this slightly little over 11-minute idle, and we will hear Mr. Bennett's own words and his and what he went through.
The backbone of a free society is a fair judicial system, but according to the National Registry of Exonerations, there have been almost 2,500 wrongful convictions since 1989, and organizations like the Innocence Project are devoted to overturning them. Well, today, a young man who did it himself, now 36-year-old Hassan Bennet of Philadelphia, spent 13 years of a mandatory life sentence in prison, convicted of masterminding a second-degree murder. He just represented himself in a retrial and won. We want to hear how that feels, but first, what happened? Hassan, welcome.
Welcome.
That was some serious business. You were convicted of masterminding the plot to kill 19-year-old Devin English after losing $20 to him in a dice game. That was the claim. There were two other teens. Corey Ford was shot. Lamont Dade arrested. He pled guilty and was sentenced, but in their statements to a homicide detective, they identified you. Now, we're going to unravel that, as you did in court. But at this time, as this is all happening and you're being accused, and by the way, you also had proof you were somewhere else at the time, that must have been crazy-making.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, how'd that feel? These are friends of yours saying you did it?
Well, one of them was a friend of mine, and when I found out that he was saying I did it, I just felt like, why? I didn't understand why he would finger me for the incident. It was kind of like I was hurt,
Yeah.
I felt betrayed, I felt crushed because I had love for this guy.
Well, and also, you had phone records showing that you were on the phone at the time with someone else. There were witnesses to that. What happened? Your lawyer didn't submit those?
No, my lawyer didn't submit anything. After trial, I just looked at his transcripts, the notes of testimony, and realized his whole game plan was the witnesses had lied once. They lied twice. You can't believe them.
Oh, even though there were phone records showing you were on the phone somewhere else with someone else?
And he had the phone records. The phone records were found in his file.
Yeah. It's got to be head-spinning that you're convicted and sent away.
Yes, it's like, I often tell people, it's like drowning. It's like being pushed off a cruise and you're drowning. You're in a total panic.
Yeah. So before you decided to represent yourself, you had a lawyer that was obviously ineffective. When did you decide, I'm going to go for these appeals and I'm going to represent myself?
Well, in 2013, my lawyer was just sitting on my case. He wasn't doing anything, so I filed a motion to withdraw counsel and represent myself.
What did people tell you, by the way? What did people say? I mean, that's rare.
They said, no, you're going to mess it up. They're not going to respect you. You don't know the law. You're going to mess it up. If you stay there, you're going to just stay in jail. And right then, I was like, I have to represent myself. No one's going to fight for me like I'm going to fight for myself. No one's going to talk for me as like I'm going to talk for myself. No one's going to study this case as hard as I am for myself.
You first represented yourself in your third trial last September. Hung jury, all but one juror found you innocent. And people at the time, other jurors said, oh, this is going to crush this guy. Why didn't it? Why didn't you quit then?
Well, at first, when I found it was a mistrial, I felt defeated. But when the papers came out and told me it was 11-1 and I saw the comments the jurors was making and how they felt about my representation as well as the case, I thought it was like I was being praised, you should say. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I am headed somewhere.
I'm on to something because these jurors in your third trial were praising you for the representation you did. Well, now you throw yourself into learning about the law in earnest. What did you do? How did you prepare?
Well, I would read. I would read day and night. I would read until 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd go to sleep. They'd wake me up at 6 o'clock and I'd prepare to go to the law library. Everything would be about law. I would only watch TV shows like 60 Minutes, 48 Hours, 2020, How to Get Away with Murder, Vindicated, Death Row Stories. I would only, Forensic Files, I would only watch TV about law. If you wasn't talking about law, I didn't want to be around you. I would get in arguments with everybody. I would read books called The Art of Argument, and I would just try the tactics of argument with basic people, with the COs, with anybody I could to try to prepare me to go to trial, to try to prepare me to go to my evidentiary hearing.
There was an older inmate who helped you, we understand, Brother Mookie?
Yeah, Brother Mook. Yep, Richard Wilson. He sat me down, and we was in the cell together, and we began to have legal conversations. One time, I wrote a petition out. I typed it out, and I asked him, yo, could you review this petition? And he said, I'll review this petition if you read this book. And the book was called Perfecting Brief Writing. So I read the beginning, I read a little bit of the middle, and I read the end. I told him I finished after like 2 days. He looked at the petition, and then he just ripped it up. He ripped up my petition. So I'm like, yo, what'd you rip up my petition? And he said, you didn't read the book. I told you read the book. You didn't read the book. So I'm like, how you know I didn't read the book? He said, read the book and you'll figure out how. Once I read the book, I realized there was a format of brief writing called IRAC, issue, rule, argument, conclusion. And that's how he knew I didn't read the book. But once I read the book, I wrote my petition. I didn't need him to help me because he gave me tough love. He made me find it myself.
Well, and then you took it with you to your fourth trial last month. After the hung jury. Now, let's pick up your story, because we said that there were two young men, one a friend, who testified against you. They fingered you in their statements to a homicide detective. That homicide detective was James Pitts. Both those young men recanted and said that Detective James Pitts actually coerced them. It turns out that James Pitts has been assigned desk duty because of a number of different cases in which he's been not just accused, but it's been proven that he coerced testimony. So in your fourth trial, let's go first to you bring those two young men into the courtroom to cross-examine them about their statements against you. Was that hard to face these two young men?
No, when I decided to represent myself, I decided early that I would have to separate myself from the case. So I would have to look at this case as if I'm not defending myself, I'm defending a defendant. So I would often call myself the defendant to separate myself from these guys. So as the prosecution called them, I just listened to what the prosecution said, took notes. I had already had pre-drafted questions for them and pre-drafted answers that I want from other testimony. So I just stuck to the game plan and question them in the angle that I needed to question them.
So both these young men recant. Say, you know, we were forced to say this. Hassan Bennet was not there, was not involved. Then you put Detective James Pitts on the stand. How did you address him? This is somebody, again, who is on desk duty because of being accused of coercing witnesses.
Well, I had known that he had cost the city over $3 million for beating up witnesses. I had studied those cases. I had reviewed his answers. I knew how he tried to dance around questions. And he's real tricky. He's like a fox. So even before putting Detective Pitts on the stand, I had questioned cops, well, other detectives that the prosecution put on the stand. And all those detectives said that Detective Pitts was nowhere near the witnesses. They said they interviewed all the witnesses. The witnesses blamed Detective Pitts, and the detective tried to exclude Detective Pitts to say the witnesses were lying. So when I called Detective Pitts on the stand, one of my main angles was to show he had contact with the witnesses. And he admitted to having contact with those witnesses, despite what the detective said. So they crossed each other. They banged each other in the head. I had also known that when I asked Detective Pitts why the witness was down there so long, I knew he would color it as if he was trying to convince the witnesses. That's the word he uses, convince. So all I had to do was show how long the witnesses were down there. They were down there. You keep a gunshot victim down there, down homicide, locked in a room for over 10 and a half hours. And you say you don't remember what you did to him. I knew the jury wouldn't believe that, especially after every witness, at least 4 witnesses, claimed that he did some type of misconduct.
Look, Hassan, you wore your prison uniform against all advice.
Yes.
You compared yourself to a Sesame Street character,
Yeah.
Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah. See, the judge in trials instruct the juries that you can use your common sense and experience to review the evidence. So when I spoke to the jury, I told them I learned common sense as early as Sesame Street. I used to watch Sesame Street, and they would begin with a song, and it would say, one of these things just doesn't belong here. One of these things aren't quite the same. Which one of these things just doesn't belong here? Now it's time to play our game. It's time to play our game. And in the segment, they would start off and they may show an apple. Then they'll show a peach. Then they'll show an orange. Then the last thing they'll show is Oscar the Grouch. And they'll ask you which one of these things don't belong. Now, common sense tells us Oscar the Grouch doesn't belong. But I told them the prosecution was trying to urge them that Oscar the Grouch belonged because Oscar the Grouch is outside all day. Oscar the Grouch has a smart mouth. Oscar the Grouch, he speaks his mind openly. He will bang his trash lid on you if he doesn't like what you're talking about. He's the Grouch. So that because Oscar the Grouch isn't the favorite person in Sesame Street, if something was to happen in Sesame Street, the first person they'll blame is Oscar the Grouch. I didn't belong in that case, but since I had a smart mouth, I talked back to the cops, I challenged them when I felt they did something wrong. They fingered me for that case. Because I wouldn't help them in other investigations, they fingered me for that case.
That's Hassan Bennet, who just represented himself after 13 years in prison, proving he didn't mastermind a murder. And he's well aware he's not the only victim of flawed justice here.
It's getting lost that a person died in this. I know people praise me. Oh, you did it. You did it. You learned the law. But somebody died in this matter.
South Korean officials said the North cited unexplained internal reasons for pushing back the Ari Sports Cup by approximately 3 weeks, adding to...
That is the end of that, my royal family. And just listening to the interview of Mr. Bennet, you can tell that he's a genius with a high IQ. Doesn't that resonate, my royal family? Nothing is new about this at all. I'm going to keep up with this because they owe him some money. And one thing that I did not do was, this article was put out on May 6, 2019. And so, the driving goal for me putting this video up was to continue to show the royal family who we truly is and how gifted we are. We all have been affected by the system, and even with whatever effects that we have, that should not stop us. It does not stop me from putting up these videos. I'm not the greatest reader in the world. I can't always quite enunciate my words. And I just keep pushing forth. I just keep pushing forth. I could not read until I was in the 5th grade. And it never stopped me even at that age. I was not ashamed. I wanted to learn. I'm fascinated with many things. And I love researching. And don't let that stop you. And you're going to have your critics. You're going to have people that say, oh my goodness, you couldn't enunciate that word correct. You know what's going on with you. That's just what it is. Don't let that bother you. I know along his journey, you know, spending all that time in jail had to be really hard. That's a test of his faith. And that's what we must do. Continue to have total faith. Continue to really do the self-assessment of self and embrace these gifts. You're chosen, my royal family. You're chosen. All we have to do is just ask Yah, please guide me in this. I'm lost in the wilderness, but I am willing to be led, and along the way I may stumble, I may fall, and there will be people that are put in your life purposely to lead you wherever you need to go. That's why I always speak respectful and humbly to the royal family, because along the way I don't know who is going to be the one to enlighten me. And that's the reason why the enemy don't want us to unite. Because once we get past whatever our isms is, we all have a wealth of information. Like I said long ago, my chosen ones, we all have a piece of the puzzle. We don't have the full piece. Yah has that one piece, because the enemy, if we had the full piece of the whole puzzle, all those parts, the enemy would be gunning for us. And that piece would represent our gifts and the things that we learn along the way in our lives. So I thank the royal family and the people who have came in my life, and the people who I haven't met y'all personally, but I read your comments, and I'm always enlightened, and I'm always learning from the royal family. You are that special. You are that powerful. You are that excellent and brilliant. So, my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.